Okay, looks like we are live. Awesome. So today is another one of our clients requested an overview on this, and as I mentioned in one of the previous live streams, they're in Australia, so it is very hard with a 16-hour time difference to coordinate schedules. So thought it would be a cool idea to put some of this stuff up on a live stream that lets them consume it when they want, and anybody else that needs this kind of information, hey, it's available to you. I hope you find it useful in some way. So today what I want to talk about is sort of the basic overview of how wireless warehouse works. I have not set anything up in advance, so we're going to have to do all the transactions, everything, and that way nothing will get missed and you can see exactly how it works. So I thought what we'd start off with is sort of like a basic overview of how material moves in the wireless devices and all of that whenever you are actually scanning material. Okay. So let's say, for example, that you're going to receive in some material. And assuming this is a bit of a larger warehouse operation, I'm going to kind of go with the maximum reasonable number of steps. Okay. So let's say when you receive this stuff in, let's see if I can get over here to Photoshop. Okay, there we go. Bear with me, new drawing tablet. Okay, so let's just assume for the sake of argument that everything, what's going on? Don't need to do that. Let's see. I have no idea what I just did. Oh, well, I have it in select mode. That would be a problem. Okay. See, this is what happens when you go live. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, so let's assume that everything starts off by coming into a receiving bin. Right, so you receive everything right there at the dock. And you can do that with wireless warehouse receipts. No problem. So everything goes into a receiving bin. All right. Now you need to get the material into the bin that it's ultimately going to live in, right? And so let's just say this is like bin A. Okay, so to make that happen, this is a WWMS put away. All right, so you'll do the wireless warehouse put away operation to move things from one bin to another. All right, then you need to pick an order, right? So we're going to use WWMS picking. And it doesn't really matter what the transaction is, whether it's a secondary process, sales order, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's all pretty much going to work the same. All the pick operations are very similar that way. One second. Okay, so what happens when you pick it is it goes into what's classified in the back of the system as an RF bin, a radio frequency, or a wireless bin. So that's something that you really want to try to get your head around pretty quickly, is that the wireless device itself and the person using it, so it's the wireless device and the person logged into it together, that is a bin. And you have to name the bin when you log in to the wireless client, which we'll demonstrate in just a minute. So the goods are in the RF bin. And then during the picking process, you're going to do a deposit operation, right? And what that's going to result in is you're going to be in putting the material into like a shipping bin, or maybe you have a bin for each dock door or each lane, or whatever you do when you're staging up material and getting it ready to ship out. It's going to get deposited into that bin, and then once you've run around and picked out the whole order and deposited everything into that shipping bin, then the entire order is in that shipping bin and it's ready to invoice out. So the key point to all this that I really just want to reiterate is this one right here. It's the RF bin. Just understand that if you can't find material, if it's lost, if it's whatever, a lot of times it's going to be in that RF bin. And those bins can get messed up. They can get locked up from time to time. And you can use I think it's the wireless terminal maintenance screen or something like that, which we can look around for it in the system while we're in there to show you how that works. But this is the basics. These are the things that you need to understand about, like, the way that you're moving it physically is actually very close to the way that it moves in the system. It's in this bin. I'm going to pick it up and put it away. So even during this put away process right here, it is also going to be in that RF bin for the length of time that you have, after you have picked it up out of the receiving bin, but before you have put it away into bin A, it is sitting in your RF bin. So digitally, it's like you carrying the material around. That's how it works. All right. So hang on one second here. We're just trying to fix a slight technical issue. There we go. Almost fixed. Cool. I think we're there. Yeah. Okay. Technical issue has been overcome. All right. So I think we can pretty much just get rid of that. Actually, you know what? We'll hang on to it just on the off chance we need to come back to it. All right. When you log into P21, and I'm only considering this through the web client. I mean, at this point, my humble opinion, there's not really any point to demonstrate things in the desktop client. It's 3 or so years behind us or whatever it is. It's really time to start looking down range. Okay. So not really going to mess around with printing. You'll be mapped out to a wireless printer. But the thing that is different is when you click on the gear icon over here to bring up the ability to edit your profile, you're going to click this WWMS login checkbox, and you have to enter a company ID, a location ID, and then a bin ID. And so this goes back to that RF bin. You have to name the bin something. And I really recommend that you do that via, I don't know, some sort of convention. So a lot of times initials is really good, so that bin, TS is for Thomas Smith or whatever. But there should definitely be some sort of convention to it, so you know what's what. You could use somebody's, last four of their employee ID or whatever you want to use. But you need to really make it easy on yourself to be able to tell in the system who moved the material without having to dig around do a bunch of research. So my recommendation is that you name the bins in such a way that you can identify the person who was logging in easily. It'll just save you some research steps. Okay, so we save that, and now you see we get, now you see we get a little bit different of a look. So the WWMS settings are in there. All right, the P21 comes up. It still looks pretty much the same as it did before. The only difference is if you come over here and type in WWMS, you'll see that you get a lot more menu items, okay? And you can favorite them and anything else you need to do. So we're going to just like do simple transactions. Okay. If there's other transactions that we don't get to that people want to see, then, you know, getting into things like moving pallets and picked order movement and things like that, that's fine. We can do that in the future, but in the interest of not overwhelming someone that's just trying to get their head around how wireless works, which is what this video is really more about, let's just stick with simple things: picking, receiving, put away, stuff like that. Think maybe even an inventory adjustment or something. So we'll just kind of see how it goes. All right. So let's just take it from the top. Let's get an order in the system. And create the need to pick that order. Okay, I do not want this to be a quote. And, you know, again, your location has to be wireless enabled. And I think it is. I'm like 99% sure that we already have that set up on this system. If we don't, then I'm just going to have to go back and fix it. But hey, that makes it more interesting, right? All right, we'll get 10 of those. And that's really it. We'll just start with something simple, one line order. So let's get the pick ticket printed. Okay, there's our pick ticket number. All right. Now, normally we would go to shipping, but we don't really need to do that. Now there's couple of different ways that companies are going to go from this point forward. We're going to stick with what I'm going to say is the simpler way, which is the pick ticket prints off the printer, and it is handed to a warehouse employee to then go and pick. So I'm not really going to get into wireless workbench, at least not at this point. If we have time, we may get into that, but really I just want to focus on, again, let's keep it simple. Let's get the basics down first. All right, so there's our pick ticket, and we're going to now, instead of going to the shipping window, we can go to sales, WWMS sales order picking. And you can see this is a much narrower use of screen space, right? It's really designed with the idea that it's going to be displayed on a small device. But again, keep in mind, this is just running off of a web connected device. I'm running it off of my laptop right now. You could run it off of a handheld. You could run it off of a iPad or an Android tablet or whatever. I mean, it's just connecting through a browser, so it's good that way. Okay, let's get our pick ticket number in. And we're not using a pick zone. We go next. Okay, so all of these parts track lots, and we are using lot bin integration because I believe that's actually a hard requirement. If you have lots and are tracking bins, it has to be lot bin integration for wireless warehouse to work. So keep that in mind if this is something you're thinking about adding to an existing system. So it's looking for a confirmation scan to make sure that we're in the correct bin. So we're supposed to be at bin A1 right here. So what we want to do is just confirm, yes, we are in fact at A1. Okay, now it's going to look for a confirmation scan on the item. So we have presumably, we're at the pallet rack. We have scanned the bin barcode on the rack. Now it's looking for a confirmation scan on the item ID. So again, having the product labeled and barcoded, very, very important with WWMS. If you don't have that, to be honest with you, I don't even know why you would attempt to use this, because it's going to be painfully slow to sit there and thumb everything in. Well, once I've done my confirmation scan on the item, now it's taking me to the lot to do a confirmation scan on there. So again, thinking about your labeling, right? If you use lot controlled items, you are going to have a label that has a barcode for the item and a barcode for the lot ID. And that's something that you can print in the receiving process, but you need to have a plan for that. You are absolutely going to need that. It's going to be crucial for you to be able to pick efficiently. All right, so we do our confirmation scan on the lot, and now it's looking for the quantity that you're going to pick. And you can over and under pick. We're not going to do that at this point. Let's just stick with what we got. Take the easy way through the system the first few times. So now we've said, okay, we've got 10. Now it's prompting us to print a label. Okay, so what happens is you're going to define a wireless, I think it's the wireless item label or ship item label, I believe. But in any event, it's a label that is basically communicating and is meant to be put onto the product that you've picked to say, okay, you know, I've got quantity 10 of this item, this lot, in this container or bag or whatever you put it in, and it's for this order, this line number, whatever information you want to put on it. It's pretty easy to customize, but it is a label that comes out every time you make a pick, and you can say how many labels you want to print. I can't really print a label at this point from this setup, but you know, that's cool. We'll just go ahead and tell it not to print any. Okay, and now we're at the deposit screen, right? So it's saying, okay, I have it. Where do you want me to put it now? You've picked it. Where are we putting it in order to get it ready to ship out? So a lot of times this is, like I said earlier, this is going to be things like, oh, it's a dock bin, or there's a lane on the dock, or just a generic shipping bin if it's a smaller facility. But again, you're going to want to have little bins carved out one way or another that allows you to track this material. Something I tell people about Wireless Warehouse is it amplifies your process. If you have a good process for controlling material and moving it through the warehouse, it's going to make it better. If you have a bad process for that, Wireless Warehouse won't fix it. It will make it worse. It'll make it worse because material will start getting moved around in real time in the system. And if people don't know what they're doing or don't understand what they're doing, it's going to be a disaster. Or if somebody and I've seen it has happened to me as a manager, where somebody just decided they didn't want to put material away. So they scanned it away to wherever the system told them to scan it, but they physically put it in a different bin. So again, it's not, Wireless Warehouse doesn't cure your problems. Good processes and good management of your team and training, that's how you have solid process and how you have organization in a warehouse. This will just make it better. It's going to accelerate it in either direction, right? It's either going to accelerate it toward the good if things are good, or it's going to accelerate it toward the bad if you have no control over process. So I'm not trying to scare people out of using it or whatever. It's not that hard to use. It's a great tool. It really helps a lot with tracking material down, but it's not a magic bullet. No system is a magic bullet, but especially not this one. Okay. So now we need to put this away. We're going to put this into a bin called ship. Okay, and now at this point, it's returned me back to the, hey, what's my next pick ticket screen. If we had another line, it would have just advanced us to the next line and had us pick that one. And your deposit would come at the end. So it would walk you through and say, okay, you need to pick line 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you presumably have all those lines in your RF bin, and then you deposit them all at once. But again, that was a one-line order, so we only had to do it once. So let's go look and see sort of how that looks from the shipping window, okay? So again, our pick ticket number is the one that ends in 19. And we have not confirmed the shipment, so it's still accessible from the shipping window, or it should be. Oops. Okay, there's our line showing that we shipped 10. Now, if I go here to the lot bin tab, here's what you see. And let's open this up where you can see everything. You see that there are 0 in A1. And if you remember, that's where we started, was bin A1. And then here's AP01. That's my RF bin. There's 0 there. But now there are 10 in the shipping bin, and that's where I deposited it to. So this thing, in a lot of ways, kind of gives you the lineage of how an item got picked and where in the process it is. So it's a pretty decent little way to look at things. From the order standpoint, I may regret clicking that. Yeah, it's an order drill down. That's not really what I wanted. Let's go back to order entry. So if I'm inquiring on this and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with it, over here in the warehouse activity tab, it's telling me, hey, this pick ticket, every item on it has been picked and the status is deposited, which means that every item on this pick ticket has been deposited into a bin. So that kind of gives you an idea that, oh, hey, this thing's ready to go. This, even if it hasn't shipped yet, it's been picked. So again, if you're following the process, if you're working the way that P21's workflow wants you to work, this can be a very valuable tool. But if the process is being subverted, and I'll give you a great example of how I've seen the process subverted. Somebody gets the pick ticket in hand. They take it with them with a pen. They leave their wireless device at their bench. They go gather up all the items and bring them to the table, count out what they need to count out, put everything back, hopefully in the same place that it came from, but who knows, because none of this was tracked in the system. And then they go and just very quickly thumb through the scanner and say, yeah, I did that, yeah, I did that, yeah, I did that, yeah, I did that. So nothing's happening in real time. In any of these types of systems, you're going to want the physical process and the digital process to be as close to the same as possible, and you're going to want them to occur in the same time frame as closely as possible. So even though people might not feel like, oh, this is the best way for me to work, well, understandable that could be an issue sometimes, but the reality is, for the purposes of knowing where your material is and keeping up with it and it not becoming a complete disaster, then you're going to have to follow the process. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out. So highly recommend that. If you're just joining us, we're doing sort of a basics on wireless warehouse and how it all works. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll be happy to try and answer it if possible. Otherwise, we're just going to keep driving on. We have completed the sales order picking part of it and now are showing how that reflects back into the pick ticket in the shipping window and also into order entry. So, okay, let's move on from there. I can tell you that from a confirmation of shipment, or when stuff actually leaves the dock, I've seen this done a couple of ways, but the most common way that I've seen it done is kind of what we're doing right here. There is a person out on the sales or on the warehouse floor with a wireless device, and they're out there picking items, and their responsibility terminates once it's been deposited. Typically, if they're carrying the paper pick ticket around with them, they'll just set that into like a file tray at the shipping desk and say, I'm done, give me my next one, and they go do that. Again, we're not really talking about the concept at this point of using the wireless workbench, which is a great tool, but in the interest of keeping it to basics, then, I'm trying to not add too many things in here. Anyway, so what would normally happen is, okay, at this point, we're going to pick whoever our carrier is and get our tracking number in if we have one at that point. Somebody at the shipping desk is preparing that. And then they're going to print a packing list, confirm the shipment, and it's ready to go. Or they may print a packing list and then come back the next morning and confirm it after it's left the dock or whatever. But at this point, we have our packing list. We know, a lot of information's on there just like normal. Nothing really changes there. And it's been invoiced and we're done. So what benefit did you really get by using Wireless Warehouse in a process like this? I think what I would say is you got the benefit of having absolute control over the inventory in real time through the entire process. So there was never a point at which you didn't know where the parts were. And if you're running without a wireless management system like that, then I'm sure you can point to examples in history where it's like, hey, where's this item? It's supposed to be in this bin. Well, we got this order for it over here, and you're flipping through all the pick tickets to try to figure out, hey, where's this item? And, you may find it, you may not find it. Hey, who's picking that order? Whatever. So this just sort of puts all of that into a system and hopefully eliminates a lot of problems. Okay. So that gets us through the shipping process, right? And the picking process, really. Let's put a purchase order in, and we'll do a receipt of goods. Oops. Okay, so we're putting in a PO. Let's say we're going to get 10 of these at some price, whatever that may be. All right, so we've got our purchase order. Now it's being processed by the vendor. Eventually it's going to show up on the truck, be it UPS or LTL or however it gets here. And we're going to want to receive that. So again, we're going to go to WWMS. I believe it's just receiving, or maybe it's purchase order receiving. Purchase order receipts, there it is. We get our PO number in, and here we go. So it's going to try to get you to receive in the blind to some degree, which it should. You want people receiving what they're actually receiving, not what they think they should be receiving. So you're going to do a scan, or maybe there's a line number or whatever. Hopefully these materials are marked, or you have some sort of a packing list or something from the vendor. Okay, this is PO line 1. I ordered 10. I've got 10 open. How many did I actually get? You can absolutely do multiple receipts on the same line. So you should not be putting in 10 even though you got 9. You don't know if that 10th one's coming, later on or whatever. So again, the focus should be ground truth. What actually is happening, that's what we want to go in the system. We don't want to put something into the system that's not correct, only to then have to come back and clean it up again later. That, to me, is crazy. So, all right, we'll go ahead and receive in our 10. And this is lot controlled, so it's going to, I have it set up to auto assign lot numbers. So it's in lot 25 at this point. And now it's prompting me at this point to print a receiving label, which is great. So your receiving label, again, can be formatted in a lot of different ways, but you can get all of the information on there that you need. You can get the item ID, the lot number. Both of those can have barcodes, and those are both very critical to have on there, because you can then use that label to pick the item later on. So that's important. There's some other information that I think is valuable to have on there. In the data stream, there's an originating, I think it's called a originating document number, but that will carry through a production order number if you're receiving a production order, or a transfer number if it's a transfer, or it will do the purchase order number if you're receiving a PO. Whatever it is, it's going to give you that number. I think it's helpful to have that on there so that if you're ever having to do research, maybe you come up with a nonconformity 6 months from now. You open up the box and the threads are bad on half the bolts, whatever, right? Where did we get this thing? That will immediately tell you. You can put the date on there that the label was printed, so you'll know it was this PO, we received it on this date. That's going to make the research process way easier. So that's just my recommendation. Get as much information on those labels as you possibly can to make them useful without, just making it unreadable. Again, I don't have a label printer set up, so I'm just going to skip this step. And where are we going to put this? So I think this really depends on how you run your operation. If you can envision a scenario where the UPS truck is basically backing up to the dock, dumping off a bunch of packages. If your receiving process is, hey, I've got this big table or this big area sitting right here at my receiving dock, and you're going to tear all those things open, look at those packing lists and receiving everything you got, and it all sits in that same spot on the floor and doesn't move, then I would highly recommend that you set up a default receiving bin at that warehouse location, and everything gets received into that. And then you do a system or self-directed put away to put the item into the rack or into the bin where it actually is going to live for the time that it's in inventory, right? That to me is the closest representation of reality. Having said that, if your process is, no, as soon as I get this item, I'm going to receive this item and take it to where it's supposed to go, then you can receive it directly to the bin. But I see a lot of times people that are receiving directly into the inventory bin, like the primary bin, but the inventory never actually really makes it there. It either gets left in the receiving area, or it's stuck to another item and gets put up somewhere else, or whatever. And again, that is a really good way for the system to help you lose control of inventory, which to me defeats the entire purpose of having something that's going to track and move your inventory in real time, right? So my strong recommendation is you need to make this part match your exact process. And most of the time, even if they don't think about it that way, if you sit and observe somebody's receiving process, that material sits in a receiving area until all of it's received in, then they go start putting it away. So my recommendation would be do it that way, receive it into a receiving bin. Okay, that's done. We're finished. And I don't even think we can deposit or anything. I think at this point we're done. Yeah, there's nothing else to receive on this. So we can just clear it out and move on to the next PO. All right, so if we now go and look at that, and I don't know if I have this system set up for auto approving WWMS receipts, but we're about to find out. I'm actually going to go try to grab the receipt number itself. that should be it right there. And again, if you have a question, feel free to ask it. Just put it in the chat, whatever. I'm happy to answer anything. I would much rather have a question to answer than sit here and talk to the void. Makes it more fun for me. Okay, so there's our item. It is not approved. So that is a setting in system settings. I think it's in system settings. It might be in location maintenance. We can go look, but see, this receipt is not approved, and that's a matter of process. It's a business decision. Are you going to just accept whatever happens on the wireless device as law, or do you want to review it before you let it happen? So again, it's kind of like the reverse of the shipping dock, right? Where we talked about before, the person goes and picks it, they deposit it to a shipping bin, they drop the pick ticket off, and then the person at the shipping desk or the shipping manager or however that works, they're looking at everything, they're selecting out the carrier, they're putting in the tracking number and all that, and they're the ones that are actually shipping the material, and the picker's responsibility terminates as soon as it's deposited. This, if you don't use approved receipts, is basically the same thing, where I'm thinking of a scenario where the receiving person's their responsibility terminates at the point at which it's deposited into the receiving bin. They're going to hand that packing slip off to the receiving manager or whoever's working at the desk, and then that person's going to pull up the receipt, and they don't have to know the receipt number. Okay, I did that as a shortcut, but let's just clear it out, and I'll show you what happens if you don't do it that way. If I just go put that same PO number in, it's going to say, hey, I have an unapproved receipt, one or more, for this PO. Do you want to select from that? You're going to say yes. Now, in this case, there was only one. And because there's only one, it's just going to retrieve that. But if there were multiples, you would get a list. And that's kind of cool, because that actually allows you to have more than one person working in that receiving area, just receiving stuff in, and it should all kind of roll up. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and approve this now. And before we do, we'll look at the lot bin tab, and you can see it just went straight to the receiving bin. That's the first movement. There was no movement before that, so it doesn't actually go into the gun or into the wireless device, because it's not coming from anywhere that's already in your system. So it's just you're dropping it straight into the receiving bin. That's why you don't see an RF bin thing there. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and receive that in. And what else we got here? Let's take a look at that in Item Master Inquiry. All right, so if we go look at our inventory by bin, there we see that we have the 10 in the receiving bin, and the rest of them are in other bins, whether it's A1 or A6 or whatever. And as we highlight each of those, we can see even what lots are in that bin. So there's a scenario where you have 2 different lots in that bin. Okay, so now we have this material. It's sitting in the receiving bin. The next thing that we need to do is we need to put it away, and we need to get it into its final destination, right? So let's say, for the sake of argument, we're going to put this into bin A6. So the way that we're going to do that, I'm going to go ahead and back out of purchase receipts. Just close a few windows before it gets too messy. All right, let's do self-directed item put away. So WWMS, self-directed item put away. It's kind of going to be your go-to on that one. All right, so again, where are we starting from? Well, in this case, we know that we're in the receiving area because we're picking up stuff and we're putting it away. So If we're in the receiving bin, all right, now you're going to scan the item. Now there's only one lot of that item in the receiving area, but so it's going to pre-populate. When there's only one, it's going to pre-populate. But if you had more than one lot of this item in the receiving bin, you would also have to do a confirmation scan on the lot. And I think there's actually a system setting where you can make it do a confirmation scan even if there's only one lot in the bin. We'll do a quick walkthrough of location and system settings here in just a little bit once we get this one done. Okay. So we're going to move the 10. All right. Now they should be in my RF bin. I don't know how real time that's going to show up. Let's find out. So you can, if you don't know this trick, you go to Item Master Inquiry, you can go to the criteria screen, right click on a field, hit refresh data, and it just kind of reloads the same item. Okay, here's our lot 25. Look at that. So it is real time. So as soon as I picked it up, you can see now there's 0 in the receiving bin, but there are 10 in the AP01 RF bin. Okay, so this is good to know. Again, you know exactly where your stuff is as long as everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So we go back to self-directed put away, and where are we going to put this? I think we said we would put it in A6. And that's it. It's done. It's that simple. Pick it up, put it down. Pick it up, put it down. It's not difficult. And we go back here to Item Master Inquiry. And let's refresh our data again. We can go look at that lot, at lot 25. And now we see there's 10 in A6. And if we go to the bins tab, or the bin tab, we click on A6, you can see now we have 210, 10 from lot 25, and then 20, or 200 rather, from lot 1123. So again, it's updating the database, and that data is becoming available to you like immediately. Okay, so I think the next thing that we can do is we've been at this for about 45 minutes. I don't want to run too much over an hour on this topic. It'll just start to kind of drag. But we can definitely come back for some advanced topics on this. Again, I would just encourage you, once you're logged in with a WWMS login, type in WWMS into the menu search, and you're going to see everything that's there. I mean, we can talk group picking, group transfers. A lot of these transactions, they all work the same way. So that's why I'm not in a basic overview. I'm not going to try to cover every single transaction, because all of the transactions work basically the same, right? You pick it up, it goes into your RF bin, you deposit it, it comes out, then you go and confirm the transaction. All right. Let's see. System directed put away is interesting. I've seen it used successfully some, but it requires a lot of discipline. Your pick paths have to be, not necessarily your pick paths, but your bins need to be set up in such a way that it's actually going to allow you to put stuff away, right? If your process is, hey, look, we know where the inventory is because we're putting it all away with wireless devices, and you just have what's called random put away, and there's a case to be made for random put away, right? And what I mean by that is you're driving down the aisle in the forklift and you put the material in the first hole that you find and you scan it away and done, right? That's very fast. It's very efficient. And as long as you're using your scanners correctly, it should never be a problem. One of the things I like about random put away, and it may seem counterintuitive to purposely scatter material around the warehouse, But one of the most common things that I see in a warehouse is when they put all of a like item together. In your most popular items, it is very common to get congestion when 10 people are in there trying to pick the same item for different orders. So to me, I kind of like the idea, especially on my fastest moving items, for them to be scattered around a little bit. Having said that, I do think it makes sense to have quick pick areas and things like that set up where certain items do go to a designated general area in the warehouse because they're the ones that are touched the most frequently. You want to get those as close to the shipping dock as possible to cut down travel time. Now, that's a whole other can of worms and a whole other subject of theoretical discussion on how to lay out a warehouse. But, I'm just making the point that I don't think random is always the worst thing in the world. Okay. Workbench maybe we'll have time to come back to, maybe not. Okay, let's get into system settings. All right, so the main settings are whether or not you're actually going to enable it, whether or not you're going to enable the workbench, whether you're going to prompt the picker at the end of a transaction or just have them keep pick. There is a process in P21 to run wireless bin replenishment so that it's something running in the background that's also sending you things of, hey, we need to replenish this quick pick area bin from our overflow area or whatever. There's your wireless confirmation as to whether or not when you finish a PO receipt, is it going to be approved or not. So it is a system setting, which means it's going to affect every single location, branch, and company in P21 the same way. So it's an all or nothing setting. Just keep that in mind. You can choose whether or not you're going to use label printing. Unless your vendors are doing all of your labeling for you perfectly, I don't see how you get away without using label printing. But, I've not seen it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This is another good setting. What do you want to do if a transfer is undershipped? Are you going to cancel it? Or are you going to leave it on a transfer back order? My recommendation would be to cancel it and regenerate the transfer requirement at a future time, but that's just my opinion. You have some other stuff in here like what's your put away strategy going to be? And this goes back into system directed put away. Are you going to do it based on an algorithm? Or are you going to do it, hey, put it on primary bin first and then go to an algorithm? Something like that. The next one is going to be empty bin strategy. I can't remember exactly what that one does. I would actually have to look that one up. But this is just like how the system is going to think about organizing your data, really. Start pick at heaviest line. I've seen that one used pretty successfully a few times. The whole idea behind that is you're building up a pallet of material. So you want to start with whatever the heaviest line is first, and that forms the base of the pallet, and then everything goes on top of that. So that is an option in P21. Again, it's kind of an all or nothing. Everybody's got to do it that way or nobody does it that way. Prompt for serials if you're tracking outbound serials. Let's see. Clear suggested deposit bin between receipts. That's another one you can do if you don't want people going into the same deposit bin over and over and over again. Typically, the way that I've seen that done is people pretty much just go into the same deposit bin and then there's a put away from there. So yeah, again, if you have questions about anything I'm talking about, if I'm going, if you want to see something specific or whatever, please put it in the chat. Happy to do that. It's not a problem at all. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so yeah, here's another good option as to whether or not you're going to cancel whatever the underpick is on a sales order. Are you going to lock a physical count bin, or are you going to allow multiple users on the same count? Are inventory adjustments that are done on the fly. What does on the fly mean? On the fly means if I underpick something, there's a process, there's a workflow in there as it prompts you through a series of questions that will end up adjusting the material out if you say that that material is just missing or you can't find it or adjust out. I can't remember exactly what the verbiage is, but are you going to approve those types of inventory adjustments automatically, or are you going to set up a process to review those? Multi-user PO receiving. This is something I alluded to when we were demonstrating receiving, which is the ability to have multiple people receiving against the same order at the same time, and it all kind of flows up into one receipt. Okay, those are really the main ones for wireless warehouse. There's another batch of settings that you're going to want to look into. We can go through them right quick, and that's going to be over in location maintenance. In the newer, okay, I see your question, Big Johnny F. So give me just 1 second. Let me get this window open and I'll take a look at this. In the newer versions, I remember seeing they redesigned the screens for WWMS. Is that what you're using? So no, I'm not using a separate URL. Back at the beginning of this video, I'm showing how I'm logging in, which is basically when you get prompted with the login screen, hitting the gear icon. There's a checkbox to enable WWMS login, and then you're going to put in your company location and bin ID, and then it takes you in from there, and it's basically the same P21. This is 23.1 that I'm in right now, so that's about how current I am at the moment. I have heard the same thing, that there was something different they were doing with wireless warehouse. I have not seen it yet, but to be fair, haven't gone looking for it either. But I will go looking for it, and if I do find something, we'll put it into another one and go through that one as well. I think the more this information that we can get out, probably the better it is for everybody, right? Okay, so getting back into settings. And thank you for the question, by the way. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you swinging by for the live stream. Seriously. Okay, so it like makes my day to even have one person show up. So maybe someday it'll be like 10 or 20 or even more, but for right now, I'll take everybody I can get. Wireless session defaults. So I have not played around with these too much, but it looks like this is for grouping stuff up, maybe, or defaulting fields based on the ship to carrier or route, or destination carrier and route. So maybe that. The main screen that I'm used to working in location maintenance is this one, which again, there's not a ton of stuff on here, but are you enabling wireless? So that's a good thing to also know, is that just because you have WWMS turned on at one location, you don't have to have it turned on at every location. And that's particularly helpful if you have like consignment locations or, stuff like that where you really can't use wireless devices. So just because you have it turned on at one, you don't have to have it turned on at all of them. Enable wireless warehouse warning message and picking. So I think that is going to be something to the effect of, if you're trying to pick out an order, maybe in the shipping window, it warns you that it's a wireless location or that it's not, something like that. Can undershipments be allocated? Are you going to print the packing list from sales order picking or from transfer picking? Is it going to allow you to adjust in found items, stuff like that? And I think, yeah, those are the main things. Look, we've been through a lot of scenarios where we've tried to help people get this up and running. And I said this before, but there's more people logged in now. And so I want to say it again because I think it's really important. Wireless warehouse amplifies your process, pure and simple. And that means if you have good process and you are able to physically control your material well, wireless warehouse is going to help you do a better job of that. If you have poor process, if you can't control your inventory, if everybody is out there just doing whatever they want to do and you never know where anything is, and people don't follow the process, whatever process that may be, wireless warehouse will also amplify that. It will make bad process way, way worse, because what's going to happen is it's going to make it easier for people to do the wrong thing. And that has been our experience with wireless warehouses when we go through into these projects of helping people try to get it set up. You know, it's like, to me, it's always a red flag when they're like, oh, no, our bins are fine. We don't need to review any of that. I'm like, really? Because I've not seen a case where everybody's, bin data was completely pristine. There's always room for improvement, right? Or always room to go in there and try to understand, hey, is my pick path right, or this or that or the other. And that is something we should probably talk a little bit about on this one, is what your pick path is and how that works and how that plays into it. Let's see. Let's go to location bin maintenance. Oops, 10. We'll just do A6, since that's the one we were messing with earlier. Okay. So in location bin maintenance, there's some things here that are going to affect how wireless warehouse will ultimately function. I say that it really isn't any different than how things are going to function in a normal picking process, how items are sorted on a pick list, for example, or on a pick ticket, right? So the way that you have your warehouse sequencing set up and the way that you set up your system to sort, that's what's going to happen. So it'll go into the wireless device the exact same way. So you want your pick path to be as good as possible. You want to take the time to think about your pick path and try to get people through the warehouse as efficiently as possible. We did a project, I guess it's probably been, 6 or 7 years ago. And it was a very small warehouse. They had one forklift and 3 people fighting over forklift all day. And it was extremely inefficient. And so the first thing that I noticed when I went there was that I started at the shipping dock, right, where all the material was going to flow out. And I turned around and I looked at the racks that were right in front of me. And what did I see but sitting there on the floor in the bins that were as close as possible to the shipping dock was a bunch of material that had so much dust on it you could barely read the label. It was dead stock, right? And I'm like, that is your most valuable real estate in a warehouse, and you're stocking it with dead stock, right? So we worked with the client and got them bought into the idea of doing an analysis on the number of touches based on each item. And then we divided the warehouse into a high zone and a low zone. And the dividing line was, what could you pick without equipment? And my goal was to get 90 to 95% of the material that was likely to be picked in a given month. And I think what we said is if it is picked one time per month or more, we need to get it into a low zone bin. These are all small parts like fasteners, right? And if it's a situation where you don't touch it, but like once every 3 months, every 6 months, or it's dead stock or whatever, get it up into the high zone. And then what you'll do by doing that is you will automatically reduce competition for the forklift, right? Because no one's going to need it if 95% of the material is within reach distance from the floor. And so that's what we did. And again, zoning out the warehouse, getting the pick path right, getting the warehouse sequencing right, all of that stuff really helped out a lot, because we were able to say, we basically set up the pick path to say we want to go once through the low zone. And then when you've completely made it around the warehouse in the low zone, then come back and do the high zone. And basically what we were trying to achieve was keeping people off the forklift until they got to the very end. And it worked out really well. It really sped their picking up. And they actually ended up losing one of their 3 pickers about 2 months later, and they never replaced them because it didn't matter. They were efficient enough that they really only needed 2 people. So, that saved them 40 or 50 grand or whatever it was back then. Let's see. So again, if you have any questions, again, put them in the comments, or anything else you'd like to see. It's been right at an hour for this one. That's about as much as I wanted to do on an overview, but I'm happy to answer anything else that comes up right quick if we need to do that. let's see here. Just go back through the transaction list and see if there's anything else. Yeah, a lot of these I think are like, yeah, some of these are just, they are topics all unto themselves. You could spend all day just talking about the workbench. Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's about as good of an overview as I can give at the moment. There's certainly other topics that we could cover, and we will cover in the future. But for the overview for what this live stream was intended for, I think we're pretty much there. We've walked through the entire workflow of doing order entry, getting the pick ticket generated, picking it, and then shipping it, and then the same thing for the purchasing process. So really appreciate everybody that came. Thanks again for those of you that put questions into the chat. Really appreciate that. These live streams sometimes are kind of impromptu. I do have a scheduled one on Tuesdays. Usually it's either going to be 10 or 10:30. We're trying to nail it down perfectly. It's probably going to be 10:30 that I think, but we'll post that on in a community post on the YouTube channel once we've nailed it down completely. But next Tuesday there will definitely be one 10:30, and I think I'm going to run it until 2-ish, somewhere around there. But once we get into our regular rhythm, we're looking for a 4-hour live stream minimum. And we want to try to run those on Tuesdays. And then if people are asking questions and want to do more of this, then we're absolutely going to do more of this. So thanks everybody for joining, and hope you got something out of it. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next.